Harris Wallman is the author of the story collection Senseless Women, winner of the 2019 Juniper Prize for Fiction. She is an MFA from the University of Pittsburgh and currently teaches in the MFA program at Albertus Magnus College in New Haven, Connecticut. Please welcome Sarah Harris Wallman.
Hi, thank you so much for coming out. It's just, I don't live in Austin, so it's, I'm glad there's some people in space. I'm going to read two stories, one complete one that's about 4 pages, and then a teaser for the first story in the collection. This first one's called North of Eden, and it comes in part from a real incident that happened when I was in college, but mostly from when I was applying to colleges. My grandmother was terrified that I would go to Brown. And because she'd heard that at Brown they now have co-ed bathrooms. And so it was just, so I didn't go to Brown. And I did not, I went to University of Virginia and had single-sex bathrooms throughout my dorm experience. But, I always wondered, what if? We went to the college up north to get away from our families, but we didn't leave behind our need for something like a domestic bond. We were the ones who signed up for the dorm where boys and girls, men and women they called us optimistically, occupied the same hall, shared a common bathroom. It's very enlightened, though it caused some of us to suffer privately with constipation. Mornings and evenings found us chatting side by side at the sinks in the pajama sets our parents had given us for graduation. You didn't want to be the one to stink up all that enlightenment. Perhaps to compensate for the way we resolutely refused to react when we saw each other in monogrammed towels, there was touching. High fives and hugs and back rub chains, people with long hair grooming one another. One room would host a movie night and we'd pile on a futon mattress like a litter of puppies. The weather turned, and as the cold leached in the windows, there was more cuddling, more platonic sleepovers with study buddies. The bathroom mirrors were eternally fogged with the steam of our longer showers. We had to wipe the mirrors to see ourselves. We had to downplay any private anticipation of the bodies emerging from the steam clouds. Dormcest, that was called. Then Patrick, skinny boy whose room we seldom used for movie night, lost his python. Its cage was up against the window, and the draft had been more than a cold-blooded creature could take. For a few days he didn't tell anyone. We weren't supposed to have pets. But word got out. We all kept our doors open, Patrick included. Someone noticed. "Guys," said Brianna, interrupting a movie in Luke's room, "there is a freaking snake on the loose." We jumped off the futon and squealed. After a brief debate, we decided not to tell the RA. We didn't want it to reflect badly on us. "He'll turn up when he's hungry," Patrick said. And, sorry. By the second week, you could hear the feeder mice when you walked past Patrick's room. They were getting bigger and bolder. Celebratory. A few of them hit puberty and began to mate. We lay awake terrified that our warmth would draw the snake. Kara and Steve were the ones who knew about music. Steve had an old school stereo with giant speakers, and they would stay up all night playing records to each other. She often slept there, listening to blues songs with a soothing overlay of crackle and hiss. We all figured Steve was gay. Then suddenly they weren't talking to each other. Kara slept in her own room. She closed her door. Showers shortened. The convivial conversations at the sinks dissolved into a hiss of bristles, then spit and hurry back to safety, wherever that was. Jake met someone in the girls' dorm next door, started sleeping there, returning to us only to pick up textbooks and stink up the bathroom. I was the one who discovered that Steve was not entirely gay when I tried to sneak in a late-night poop and was greeted with a moaning from the shower stalls. It was Steve and Leslie. I was so put off that I didn't go for a week and eventually resorted to taking a box of stimulant laxatives that made me very hyper. I ran around saying weird shit about the government for an hour before running down into the furthest down stall and promptly clogging it. In the common spaces, people left angry notes about respect. It was the RA who plunged the toilet in the end. Someone wrote a racial epithet on Nina's door. Everyone said it couldn't have been one of us. Someone had let in the wrong sort of visitor. But we looked at one another and wondered, Guys, said Brianna, I am really scared. We hadn't fallen apart completely. Someone comforted Brianna, smoothed her golden hair, watched her while she slept. Wendy came back from a fraternity semi-formal without her shoes. She said she'd had a good time, but she started sleeping with her door closed. A lot of us were closing our doors by then. Kaylee had been spending time with a campus animal rights group. One afternoon, she stormed into Patrick's room and set the feeder mice free. It was cruel, she said. We pointed out that now the snake could eat them. This made Kaylee cry, and she had to be comforted. Don't worry, said Tyler. By now, the snake is long gone. That night, he lost his virginity to Kaylee in her loft bed. He said a prayer of thankfulness. He was the only one of us who still prayed so far from home. We did not see the mice, but they made their survival known. A jagged hole in Aubrey's cereal box, an orgy of little poops in Luke's protein powder, the disappearance of some Adderall Joan had been stockpiling to sell during finals. It was Joan who reported the mice to the administration. We called it vengeance. Joan insisted mice were worse than snakes. Warm-blooded things are furtive. An exterminator was booked for the Thanksgiving holiday. Instructions were given on how to prepare our room so that we would not return to a fine coating of poison on all our possessions. We trundled home with everything on our backs like refugees. The mouse poison will surely kill the snake, we said, a tinge of regret in our vindication. Patrick did not come back from Thanksgiving. The girl he'd taken to his senior prom gave birth prematurely. He was a father. We could no more stop talking about this than if he'd become an octopus. There was a new smell. We attributed it to the exterminator's cleansing poison, but as finals week commenced, the odor grew. Its unpleasantness asserted itself. Randy, from the country, declared that it was something dead. Shut up, said Brianna. I looked in Patrick's closet, and to have found him there dead would have made more sense to me than his choice to stay home and take incomplete. But in the closet were only clothes he never wore. It was Leslie who told us the smell came from Steve's room. At first, she thought it was only her nose. She thought it was the guilt of something she'd done to Kara. It didn't make much sense, and I wondered if she'd been taking stimulant laxatives. Wouldn't Steve notice a smell in his own room? No, he confessed he'd mixed the wrong chemicals in lab and seared his nostrils. When Leslie mentioned the smell, he pretended she was crazy. We ran down the hallway and threw open his door, and yes, some of us retched. We dumped the desk drawers and ripped into the futon cushions. We shook his textbooks until pages fell from the spines. At last, someone thought to dismantle his giant speakers. Inside, every wire and node was wrapped in putrid snake meat. We looked at it for a long time, each of us figuring out for ourselves what had happened. The snake had gone there seeking warmth and found only electricity. So, one more. So I'll just tease this one. It's the first story in the book. This one, I feel like I do have to say a little bit about where it comes from, because after my husband read it, he was like, where did that come from? I was in a writer's group in New Haven, and there was this one guy who every week turned in a story about killing a woman who basically was his ex-wife. Like, every week, just like murdered this woman again and again. They were not good stories, they were just like fantasies about murdering his ex-wife. I mean, in one of them she was pregnant, and it was awful. So I finally was like, all right, you want some dead girls? Here's some dead girls. I can put dead girls in a story too. So that's what I did. This one's called The Dead Girls Show. Carly had been going to the Dead Girls Show since she was 12. The little theater was wedged between Live Girls and Girls, 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 a block down from the city's least expensive dentist. She went at least twice a year to both, entering the show with a nice painkiller buzz that was gradually replaced by a feeling like biting into a cement candy bar. The place had been a movie theater. It smelled of popcorn and feet, and still ran a sparsely stocked concession stand. There was only one other person in the seats, a man in a puffy coat. She settled in a few rows ahead of him with a paper cup of ice cream, peeled the lid, and went at it with a little wooden paddle. Arabella was first, the anorexic. In the greeny spotlight, she looked like a starved mermaid. She stared upward as if pleading with the spotlight man for a respite that never came. As her pedestal began to rotate, her eyes stayed fixed on the booth, even as her body turned away. The spot ignited the downy arm hair her fatless body had sprouted as a last defense against the cold. When the pedestal had completed its rotation, Arabella rose to her feet and continued staring out as an elfin figure in a top hat and tails came onto the stage with a bucket of colored water. The little man, Carla knew it was a girl, one of the trios who cleared the stage between acts, poured the water and dye over Arabella's shoulders so the audience could see how it pooled in her clavicle and traced the contours of her bulging knees. Her droopy bikini was so soaked that the bottoms fell heavily to her ankles with a small splash. Her pubic hair was sparse and red. Somewhere behind the seats, a machine whirred, and then projected on a scrim were poems the girl had written about despair. The reported voice that accompanied them was a smoker, a man. For an extra fee, you could go with Arabella into a back room where she served you tea and described how her stepfather had groped her. For her finale, Arabella arched her back and spread her arms. Her eyes were exquisite with the knowledge of suffering. The girl in the top hat yanked out the halter knot, and the bikini tumbled down to the floor with the bottom. Her breasts lay against her ribs like baby mice in a pair of socks. Not all of them use names. Next is the ballerina, wearing only the skirt of a tutu. One of her ankles is crumpled and loose, and she shows it no mercy as she pirouettes and lunges about to a Chopin mazurka that becomes increasingly frantic and demented. She reaches out her lovely arms as if for a rescuer. Carly has nothing in common with these girls, but her heart leaps with them. Her limbs, on the other hand, are more generously padded. Her elbow is more like a dimple than a spear. Her feet in sensible shoes like loaves of bread. Regina, the drowned girl, is wheeled out in her tank. Her eyes are open, but without pupils, they look like giant pearls set in the prongs of her eyelashes. Her lips move, so that she seems to say, please, please, but the only sound is the delicate bloop of 3 bubbles that escape from her mouth. 3 silver bubbles, then no more. When she is gone, the 3 stagehands scurry to mop up the mossy-smelling water that was sloshed on the floor. They are not elves or even dwarves. They are girls who died very young of cancer, bald and delicate, and perhaps as a side effect of some experimental drug, pointy about the ears. A strobe light begins to pulse, but without music. The hanged girl comes out wearing a Catholic school uniform complete with red tie. The pale purple of her face is smeared with black eyeliner, liberally applied and liberally tear-streaked. Anyone who has been to the show before knows that her arms are ribboned with cuts, but that day she wears a bulky starter jacket in a Carolina blue. Panthers. Ruins the effect. Carly thinks, what girl would kill herself after receiving a team captain's jacket? The man 2 rows behind agrees. Take it off! The hanged girl, who usually keeps her head bobbing loose around her chest and shoulders, suddenly straightens. No, thank you. Carly hears a nylon swizz that must be the guy in the puffy jacket standing. Oh, I should have probably said there's some expletives in this story. This is one of them. Fuck you, he yells. He has to be a regular. In regular shows, the hanged girl comes out to a metallic song and screams, fuck you, at the audience. Her middle finger's a staccato jab in the strobe lights. Very dramatic. This time, she only shrugs. Not doing that anymore. A jumbo Slurpee hurtles over Carly's head and splatters on the stage. The hanged girl spreads the slush around with the toe of her black Converse, lights a cigarette, and walks off. Carly hears the heckler's sticky steps, then muffled shouting from the lobby. There is a pause in the action. Carly digs for a piece of gum, but in the flashing light, the contents of her large purse are garish and elusive. Finally, the strobe light goes off and a pink glow suffuses the room. They are skipping the prom night car crash victim and going straight to the grand finale. The pink is bright enough to illuminate Carly's flattened pack of juicy fruit and a few unseemly stains on the seats around her. The stagehands push Megan, the serial rapist killer's victim, onto the stage. Megan is really just a pile of limbs and a wheelbarrow with a head propped on top. But her voice is deep and commanding. She doesn't have her own act, but she always introduces the last one. Ladies and gentlemen, Megan's mouth projects especially well, having been widened several inches by her assailant's knife. It is said that unicorns walk the earth. Most of us will never see them, for so the legend has it that only the purest virgin can capture a unicorn. The sprite pushing Megan's wheelbarrow quickly rearranges one of the dismembered arms so that it gestures stage left. Electric birdsong fills the theater, and Carly begins to tear up. In the hazy moments after her own lost virginity, Carly had thought not of the bare mattress beneath her or the bikini model affixed to the ceiling above her, but the fact that unicorns were now officially beyond her. The birdsong increases in volume and is joined by the chirp of rusty wheels as the unicorn slowly begins to emerge. It is, of course, a stuffed horse altered by some whimsical taxidermist. For several long seconds, the audience sees only the head with its purple glass eye. Then, in a crescendo of computerized mockingbird, the unicorn's rider appears. Astride the moth-eaten flanks is little Adriana, still in her satin sash and sequin tiara. The froth of yellow dress is ripped in a few places, and, like a tiny Cinderella, she is missing her left shoe. As the wheeled unicorn rotates, the audience sees that on her right side, her frilly sock is brown with old blood. A runnel of crusty brick runs from the sock upper leg, which is still faintly chubby. The little queen smiles bravely, her glossy lips trembling, an obedient child, eager to please. She holds onto the saddle with one hand, and with the other hand reaches out to pet the unicorn's mane. Carly is crying fiercely now. Nothing like the sparkling hints of water in Adriana's jewel blue eyes. Carly's face puffs out when she cries. Uneven splotches, the pink of digestivates, cover her forehead and cheeks. There is nowhere for the tears to cool, so they run along her jaw and drop from her chin like a beard. When she has recovered herself, Carly stands to leave. In the lobby, the heckler argues with the tickets girl, who is not dead, just an ordinary sophomore with an after-school job. Look, says the girl, whose nose and eyes crowd the middle of her face as if shrinking from her acne. If you want to speak to him, I give up. Fine, I'll get fired for this, but follow me. Outside, Carly blinks in the sunlight. Her eyes are salted with tears, and she tries to adjust them by focusing on the kicking neon leg of girls, girls, girls. She does not see or hear the theater manager's car as he speeds out of the alley to avoid confrontation with the angry customer. When he hits her, there's a sound like a water balloon finding its target. Carly's last word is, ugh.